Hello, Russ.
Hello, Jeff.
Well, thanks for joining me from all the way around the world.
Yeah, it is kind of around the world. It's nighttime where you are and morning where I am.
So we're in the middle of summer, so you're probably in your winter.
Yeah, we're in the depths of winter, although where I am it's subtropics, so it's kind of sunny most days, but we've been getting a lot of rain, so unfortunately a lot of flooding and stuff. So, but we're okay where we are.
So when you say flooding, so is there problems like creeks and rivers, or do you get like mudslides and things like that?
Not so much mudslides, but mainly creeks and rivers. Just torrential rain. Like I think Sydney at the moment is suffering from, or out of Sydney is suffering from amazing floods. Like just getting like a whole season's worth of rain in 3 days. Just stuff like that, and we've had the same up here, just sort of fairly recently, and yeah, it's a bit crazy.
Yeah, so it's like I know they speak of things being unusual, being like a 1 in 50 year kind of thing. Is that something that happens kind of?
Yeah, they keep
frequently?
saying it's like a 1 in 100 years event, and then it happens like 2 years later, and they're like, because, and I don't want to get into the whole global climate change thing, but it's happening, people. Like,
yeah, well, the thing you wonder too, though, if it's a 1% chance, maybe you rolled 101 again.
Maybe to bring it back to the gaming. Yes, maybe we rolled 2 ones in a row.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's just crazy. The weather's and like it doesn't really get cold. Like, we'll drop to single digits at nighttime, but then like today's like 23 degrees, that's in Celsius, so yeah. I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit.
I think 23 degrees, probably around 70 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, so it's sort of like a mildly sunny day, so it's quite nice. Yeah, our winters here are great, but the summers are just humid as all heck.
Yeah, so it's probably a lot like Florida.
Yeah, I think so. And the further north you go in Queensland, the more humid it gets. So places like Cairns, or Cairns as you call it, is very much even more humid. It's pretty bad. Anyway.
Heat and humidity are not good combinations. Neither is cold and humidity.
No. Yeah, and then sort of the south of Australia is more like a dry heat. You kind of get that. South Australia, Melbourne, or Hobart's just generally cool all the time. But yeah,
it's kind of interesting. I was talking to somebody, for Australia, for being as large as it is, I believe most of your population's along the East Coast.
Along the coast generally, so pretty much except for the very north. Although Darwin's up there, which is just crazy. I don't understand Darwin. I've been there once for work, and I didn't leave the conference center. Like, I just thought there is no way I'm going out there. It was like middle of summer, and it's humid and it's hot, and it's just, yeah. I'm not really singing the praises for the tourism board, but great, amazing scenery and everything everywhere in Australia, but it's just the weather. But yeah, mostly like Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane pretty much make up, I think, probably like half the population of Australia, which is sort of that kind of east, sort of southeast coast line. And then you've got like Adelaide, and then Perth is like west. It's like way over the other side. It takes like 3 days to fly from, I'm probably exaggerating.
Yeah.
But, it takes like a long time to go from, it'd be like going from, LA to New York to go from Brisbane to Perth. So I guess so. I don't know exactly.
So does Perth like not have any other major cities nearby?
They have like satellite towns and stuff, but it's pretty isolated. Like, it's a beautiful place. Like the waters, the ocean is like a different color to the east. Like it's amazing place, but they're very it's very much of an us and them kind of thing.
Yeah.
We had elections recently, and the the premier of Western Australia, where Perth is, just didn't like the PM at all, and he's got a very strong likability over there, and the federal opposition just got slammed there. I think they lost like 20% of the vote. 20% swings against them. So, and they basically lost based on that and a few other factors. But yeah, so it's pretty, it's just a weird dynamic, really. Like it's almost like they kind of treat the state as a separate little nation of their own sometimes, but they're still well connected.
So what makes Perth a city of significance? Like, is it because a port, between things?
I mean, probably, to be honest, I probably don't know exactly, but I would say tourism and mining would probably be the two. Mining's everywhere in Australia. Like Queensland's just like, Queensland's sort of basically split in two. You've got the southeast, which is all the kind of urban city stuff, and then you've got the kind of the rest of it, like the inland and the sort of north. So there's kind of like this split, and there's a very much of a different demographic, and a lot of the mining happens sort of in the central Queensland and northern Queensland. So you've got, and this is where this whole debate around, saving the Great Barrier Reef comes from, and, just the environmentalists versus the mining, the miners, and, sort of that sort of stuff. And so there's like, for example, in the last election again, the Greens party won like 2 or 3 seats in Brisbane, which is southeast Queensland. And the National Party, which is their kind of complete opposite, held all their seats in northern Queensland. So it's sort of this kind of weird, it's almost like two different places, like politically. So it's kind of weird. It's just odd. Like Australia is just a melting pot of different ideas, and which is great sometimes and not so great other times. Like we get a lot of immigration here, which is great, like diversity and all that. Like I think Indian is number 3 now as far as people living here. So there's a lot of Indians. There's, we've got a lot of history of like Japanese coming over, and before that Greek and Italians coming over in the 50s. The Chinese was, back in the gold rush days, like in the, 19th century. And so there's a lot of, it's just a cultural melting pot, which is really cool because we get some really cool food for no other reason. But it's really diverse. It's really diverse. So, and it's getting to the point where no one can predict elections anymore. Because you just don't know what this sort of ethical group will do, and how they kind of break all the numbers down, and we don't know what women are going to do, we don't know what men are going to do, we don't know what the Indians are how they're going to vote. Are they going to vote as a bloc, or are they broken up? Like it's just too chaotic, and our political system is showing now. I think from this point forward, our political system will be much more fragmented.
But see, I guess for us, I mean, we have is basically a 2-party system.
Yeah.
And I would say,
which is what we had.
Yeah.
We had the same, but this election completely fragmented that.
To me, I can see that in many ways as being a good thing. But maybe there's definitely probably downsides to that.
Yeah. It's a double-edged sword, but no doubt. And it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, and whether, because there's a lot of independents, because we've got like, I think 12 independents now in the federal government. And before this election, we had 4. So, and then the Green Party's gone from 1 seat to 5, I think. And, the primary vote for the 2 major parties are down to like 30-something%. From 40 to 50, like it's crazy. It's really, yeah, it's just really changing the landscape. So it'll be interesting to see if that lasts, or what will happen.
Yeah, and from my time in Ireland, Northern Ireland, and here, it's just, and also hearing with Australia, it just sounds like everywhere it's just things are always just kind of in a strange turmoil. We think we always can think ours is being really strange, but other people are going through maybe not the same thing.
Yeah, I think everyone. I mean, I pay a little, like, fairly close sort of eye on the American politics, because I think, obviously America is such a dominant country in the world. It's important what happens there. So you guys are going through some crazy stuff. I always say, like, at the dinner time with my family, I always like, okay, what are we thankful for? And I'm thankful I live in Australia. Because I can see what's happening in the rest of the world, and it's crazy.
It is crazy, but yeah, I don't know how to explain it, and I don't think I can ever. It's just strange, but
yeah. Anyway,
I don't see it getting any better.
Yeah, well, like, there's always hope, I guess, but who knows. But anyway, we always have D&D to escape to.
We do, and you have a monthly magazine you're putting out.
Yes,
D12 monthly, right?
D12 monthly, yes.
So
yeah, it's
a monthly magazine. That's pretty bold to be able to, and organized to be able to.
Well, it's funny because when you hear people like creatives and people who start businesses and stuff, they sort of talk about how they go in and they're really, like, naive on the industry, or they're naive about what I went in with the naivety of, because to me, I grew up with zines being a regular thing. Like, to me, a zine was always, and that's what I kind of call it. I don't know if it's as flashy enough to be a magazine, but I call it a zine. And zines to me were always regular. So they were always, like, now, like, Zine Quest, and look at zines for role-playing games, and they're very sporadic, most of them. Like, they come out once, or they come out, maybe 3 times a year, whenever the designer wants to. And I kind of just went in with the mindset, if I do this, I have to do this regularly. Like, I have to do this monthly.
You have to.
Because that's the mindset I was in. Like, I have to do this regular. And so I just started doing it regular. And then I looked around at because I didn't really look at the zine. Like, I kind of knew, because I've followed people on Twitter and stuff, and I kind of knew the scene, but I didn't realize that most of the zines that are produced these days are like one-offs, or, they get crowdfunded, and I haven't even touched the crowdfunding thing other than Patreon. I haven't done a Kickstarter. I haven't done any of that stuff. And I could have gone down the road of, okay, let's kickstart this, for $1,000 or something, and do it once every 3 months and be like a normal person and have a life. But I I chose the route of, no, let's just do this, and the first one was 8 pages. And I thought, I can do 8 pages a month. That's pretty easy. And it's short, sharp, you could have, and especially in the A5 size, which is, I don't know what the equivalent is in America. I don't know what you call it. It's like half a letter size.
Yeah, I think I call it digest size, or
digest
I think
size,
there's statement, I think, is what some call it too.
Right. And it's not that big, like, so to fill 8 pages, it wasn't a great deal. And I just sort of put it out there, and I called it issue 0 because, session 0, I tried to be a bit clever, as a bit of a test thing, because I didn't know if it was going to work, but it worked really well. I got a good response. And then the next issue was,
and so what? No, I guess so. Yeah. So when did you do the first issue 0?
It was 14 months ago, I think.
Oh, that's good. So you decide to do this, and I'm assuming because you have if I recall correctly, I think you have a free digital, but people can pay to get the physical copy, right?
Yeah. So all issues are free on my website, so they can download the PDF, and then if they want to get a physical copy, if they can sign up to a level on Patreon, I've got one for Australia and one for overseas, for the printed edition. And that basically just covers sort of the postage and the printing costs. The printing costs aren't too bad, but the postage costs overseas are
Insane.
getting crazy. Yeah.
Insane. So you decided, so when you did this, so you did this, you had to create a website to begin with, right? Because you were planning on distributing it through.
Yeah, so I had the website already. So it depends on how far you want to go back. So DM, which is kind of the brand name that sits behind D12 Monthly, is the website and kind of all my socials. And that was actually from, I do a bit of digital marketing, like I still do. And so that was kind of, I was playing around years ago, and I thought, DM digital marketing, DM, that's dumb. I'll never use that.
Right.
And then when I wanted to start this kind of like, I kind of felt like I wanted to give back. And so I started a website, and I went, and I kind of just looked at it and went, it works. I'll throw it up. I can always change it later. Like it was very much I'll just do it. And then the more I thought about it, the more like it's a very unique name. People are going to remember it. It's very short. The URL's short. The socials weren't taken, for the most part. I'll just stick with it. Whatever. I don't care. I remember going to a conference years ago, and one of the speakers was talking about his business, and he hated his business name, and he was a successful startup. And he said, names don't matter. Because eventually, like Google's a dumb name. But now, because of everything that goes behind it, people look at it like,
but it only assumes you get to that level of success.
Well, yeah. Well, but any success is some success. You know what I mean? It's all relative. Like, I'm not expecting to be a Google.
Right. But I don't know how many millions of people have to do it before Google sounds weird to all of a sudden that's just a brand name that everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Becomes a verb.
Yeah. So, anyway, so I thought, I don't care, whatever. And then when I started the zine, I sort of like, because that was the blog and everything came first. I was sort of blogging for a little while, and blogging into obscurity, basically, and that was the stage when I was still GMing 5e. So a lot of the early, like if you look through a website, a lot of the early posts are sort of 5e related. And then I started getting back into the OSR. And when I say back into it, I'm old enough to remember it the first time around. And so when I discovered the OSR, I guess, like the old school stuff. And then when I discovered the OSR, I was like more and more interested in it. And I ended up kind of pulling the plug on the 5e campaign because I reached a point where, and I don't want this to turn into a 5e bagging fest, but it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
It was, too superhero, and the direction that the company is going, I don't really like. And the whole thing, like, it's just the whole thing. Like, it's not a bad system, it's not terrible, but it's just not for me.
Yeah.
And so I pulled the plug on those campaigns, and I sort of rediscovered again solo GMing as well, like solo gaming, because my first intro into D&D was I knew no one that played it back when I got my hands on the AD&D Player's Handbook.
Yeah,
like
that kind of been hard in Australia finding people to play, was it?
Well, I was introduced to it by my brother because he played with a friend of his, and again, like my introduction was very different. Like, there was no people sitting around a table. It was just my brother had 6 characters, and his friend was kind of GMing. I don't know how hard it was really, because I was only young. I remember watching him, and then I got into the fighting fantasy books. I was reading them, the choose your own adventure stuff, and I love them, and I still do. And then I think I inherited his books, and so I had the DMSG and the Player's Handbook. I don't even think I had the Monster Manual at the stage. Maybe I did. And then I was just solo gaming. Like, I just was creating random dungeons from the DMSG and just running my characters through. And again, I was running like 6, 7, 8 characters. I still remember their names, and I still have their, like, every new campaign that I always kind of sprinkle them in. But that's how I introduced to it. So I kind of, and that was like back in the, the early 80s, I guess, or the mid 80s. And then so now the fact that solo gaming is so popular kind of makes me smile and makes me happy, because that was kind of how I started. So that was kind of cool. And then the zine, I guess, I was actually going down the video road. So my life is a bit chaotic, and I was thinking, okay, well, I want to do a video show. Like, I want to go on YouTube and I want to do that. And I want to talk about D&D and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll do an interview show. I'll do this, I'll do that. And then I just couldn't find the time. Like, I couldn't set a block. I don't know how you do it. Like, I couldn't set, with family life and everything else going on, I couldn't set a block of time where I could just on my own, where I could just record and it was quiet and all this sort of stuff. And then the editing, like, it does my head in. And then I saw a video about a guy who was doing zines, and he just showed me how to do it in Google Docs. No, just right. This is the template. This is the template. And it's still the template I use today. I credited him in issue 0 for all those interested. And I said, and then I saw that and I went, well, why don't I just do a zine? That's a pretty good idea. And then I could just do it whenever I want. Like, I can do half an hour here, an hour there, whatever. And it just all fell into place. And like I said, that was 14 months ago. And I did, the first one was 8 issues. Eight pages. And then the next one I thought, oh, I'll do 12, because you got to go up in 4 increments, just for the, right. Because I had my idea that I wanted, because I wanted at the start, I wanted this to be a physical thing. Like, I wanted to create something that people could hold in their hands. And then when I started doing the PDFs are so easy. Like, all I did was use Google Docs. I had the template. I just deleted, copied it, deleted the info that from the issue before, and then just added the new info. And then, but because the PDFs are so easy, and I thought, oh, I'm just going to do this for free. Like, this is my marketing head. I thought, there's no way that I'm an unknown. Like, I've got no, real, skin in the game at all. I've just been GMing for 30 years. That was my claim. And so I went, I'm going to offer it for free. I'm just going to give it away for free. That's my marketing pitch. Here's a free zine with some cool stuff. And if you like it, you like it. I'm just producing stuff that I want. Because I looked around for zines, and this is where that frustration came, where I was like, man, this zine's really good, but it's not every week or it's not every month. I want to subscribe to something that's kind of cool. And then the zines that were out there were kind of wacky. Like
I understand really, what you're saying.
Yeah. Like they're kind of gonzo, and
there's like a definite fork in the road. There definitely is.
I never really liked the gonzo aspect of early D&D, and I still don't like. And they're kind of, a lot of the zines try and be like, they're really good, like they're well produced, they're great content, but they try and be out there. Like they try and be aesthetically amazing or something. Like that's their hook. And for me, I'd rather the content. Like, give me some really good content. I don't care if it's in, block text that's, hard to read, although I do care a little bit, but, I don't care. As long as it's really interesting, I'll read it. And so I couldn't find that. I couldn't find what I wanted. And again, it's, you hear all these stories about people make things that they want in the world. And I joked on a podcast the other day that I kind of wish someone would do this so I don't have to do it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I'm creating what I wanted, and people are kind of finding it good,
yeah, because I think I hate to say traditional, but it's definitely more of a traditional feel, and I think a different aim at what you would expect. And I agree with you. It's and in fact, I don't mind the gonzo and the stuff going off, but it's kind of like, even with me with putting out a zine for Zine Quest, it's like choosing stock art for a cover, and it definitely signals who you're going after when you put that cover. Do you go after a Dean Spencer, where it's a very traditional style,
which is the road I went down.
Yeah,
like I'd say probably 3/4 of my zines have his covers. I've been trying to diversify a lot. About half I'm up to issue. I'm just doing issue 15 now. So 15 issues are out, including 0. So it's hard to keep track. But issue 14 just came out last couple of weeks. But about halfway through that, so about 6 or 7, I was using his covers because because if you sign up to his Patreon, you kind of get credits. So I didn't have to buy the art, and so at the beginning, I didn't have much money. Like I was just self-funding it. So right. I wanted to keep it down. So that was a way for me to pay. I think then it was like $5 a month, and I got enough credits. And what I did was I was kind of smart. So as soon as I knew I wanted to do a zine, I was sort of doing the research for it. I signed up to his Patreon. So by the time I actually released the first issue, I had this kind of backlog of credits that I could use. And so the first, it pretty much paid. I was pretty much, not spending a lot of money on those first issues because most of the issues have just stock art through them. I've commissioned a couple of pieces from indie artists as well, and I want to do more of that, especially for some of the other projects I'm doing. But the zine is mostly stock art, and but now it pays for itself.
You have to. It's very. I mean, because I approached him about just doing some spot art. And he provided a quote, but it was more than I could pay. And then said, thank you. I said, I am using your stock art and I do appreciate. And he's like, oh, no worries. Just.
What was that, Dean?
Yeah. He even said, you know what? He goes, if these creatures ever come up for a vote or come up where people will put up for that, he goes, I'll put it to the top. Like, what a nice guy. It's like,
He's like, I don't actually mind using his art, because I love the guy. He's such a nice guy, and he gives so much to the community, and he's got such a nice little business model. I always say to some of my artistic friends, I said, follow this guy's business model, because he's making enough money off his art. Like, he's making money off his art.
Oh yeah.
And he's doing okay, I would imagine. But yeah, I really like supporting the good guys in the industry. And I think that's one of the things that I want to do I've just started doing now, is really start using my platform. It's minor in the big scheme of things, but using that to promote, the artists and the people that I really admire and that I've used. And I've, because there's a lot of indie people out there that just don't have the same platform.
Right. But it takes money to do that. So people need to be throwing money your way.
Yeah, it does. For me, it's a labor of love, so I don't mind spending a bit of my own cash. But like I said, like most of the time now, like it's self-funded. So
right.
I've sort of just recently done a budget for how much the art's going to cost, because that's the biggest cost for me, because I can't draw. So I've got a few artist friends who throw in pieces, and every now and again I'll get some really nice person who loves the magazine or the zine, and we'll just go, hey, join to draw some pictures for you for nothing, and I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. So and even issued the first issue, I believe, actually had a guest post, which was John from Tail and Manacle, who is someone you should probably talk to. He's another great guy.
Okay.
Who does? Have you listened to Tail and Manacle podcast?
No, I haven't.
Okay, it's definitely worth listening to. It's basically like a cross between a solo roleplay session and a grim dark storytelling. So basically, he tells a story, but he uses the basic D&D rules as the vehicle for telling that story. But it's really well produced. It's really well put together. He's just starting season 2 now.
Okay.
But season 1 was great. Yeah, really, really good storytelling, and a really good mashup between the two. And so he gave me an article, and so I have guest posts, sort of guest articles, sort of maybe average one a month, maybe one every 2 months. I don't pay for them. And I don't ask them to do it. They just sort of offer. They say, hey, I just want a bit of exposure or whatever. And because I'm not at the point, like I'm starting to think now, okay, so how much can I offer somebody without insulting them? And I know you've talked a lot about this on your
Oh yeah,
episode about, do I pay 3 cents a word? And I know you're offering now, I think 6 cents a word for an article. And I kind of, I'm like, okay, so most of my articles are around 1,000 words. So that's what, like $60.
Yeah.
Which isn't too bad. Like now that I kind of put the number, because I always thought there's no way I can afford to pay someone to write articles. And that's kind of what I do. I'd rather pay for the art because I can't do it. You know what I mean?
Right.
But now I'm thinking, oh, well, if my earnings get to the point where I can, that diversity actually might be good for the zine,
But I think the thing too
is
if you're writing the whole, if all you're doing is you're not paying for all the writing, that's no more than buying stock art, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, true. Because I think my budget for stock art per issue was around that sort of $60, 50 to 60. Covers range probably anywhere from. It depends if I use Dean, it's free because I'm paying. I've got all these credits to use up, but if I use somebody else, which I do trying to do because I like to share the wealth around as well, it might be like say $20 to $30 for the cover, and so that's half the budget gone, and then the interior is just black and white. So I kind of did it on purpose. A lot of these things I kind of did by accident, but then I kind of think, well, maybe I did it on purpose and I just wasn't aware of it. But I did the cover is color. And it's usually printed on a thicker stock, and then the interior is all black and white. And I wanted to do that initially because in my mind I was like, I want the OSR feel, like I want that old school feel, and that's that black and white interior. But to make it pop, to get people's attention, I want that color cover. So I think, like you said, the cover does sell it, but I feel like some of the indie zines sort of do that black and white kind of cover. And I think, does that get lost? Is that enough to draw people's attention? Like some of the art is awesome. Like but a lot of the zines I see, I go, eh. But then again, it depends on the audience you're going for. And to be honest, when I started, I didn't have an audience in mind. Like my zine is what I call edition agnostic. So I try and keep it for everybody, no matter what edition. There's definitely an OSR sort of old school aesthetic to it. Like the vibe of it is definitely that because of the art I use. But that's just because that's the art I love.
Right.
Like that line art, that black and white line art is my perfect art spot. If you had a color version of it and a line art version, I'll go the line art version every time, And so but if you read the articles, like if something calls for a saving throw, like I'll say like a wisdom saving throw or a spell saving throw, or, like I'll divvy it up because I know kind of the lingo in each edition, except for fourth. I don't touch fourth at all, but I'm a big fan of third edition, so I use that lingo as well. So it's kind of like the old school, 5 saves, and then the third edition's 3 saves, and then the 5th edition's kind of ability saves. So I kind of keep it kind of open because a lot of the articles aren't necessarily about the mechanics. It's about, for me, I hope when people read it, they just get ideas, they just get inspired, they just get. And so while there are some mechanical stuff in there, like I'm writing one now on combat maneuvers. I feel like that you could still tinker with that enough to include it in most editions, I think. And that's what I want people to do. I don't want them just to go, oh, hey, this is perfect. This is exactly what I wanted. Or if they do that, that's fine. But what I want them to do is go, hey, this is a really cool idea. I'll take this and I'll add this and then I'll change this and I'll, because that, for me, that's what D&D is. It's stuff raw. Like just tinker and play and wreck and, mold and, whatever like that. For me, that's the greatness of D&D and a lot of other, I guess, role-playing games as well. But D&D specifically is built so that you can kind of do that.
Yeah, I think especially more so, I think Yeah, and I think, and that's kind of how when we didn't have the internet, so a lot of that stuff, that's what we had to do, right? Because there was no
Yeah, and I'm actually
admin.
reading. I don't know whether I've got it here, but I'm actually reading a book, The Elusive Shift, I think it is, and it's about the history of D&D, like, and but not just about the history of it, the arguments that happened, and like the ways, the different play styles and how they evolved and stuff. And in that, like even before D&D was D&D, these kind of rules were circulated around, and each city had their own version of
Right.
it, because there was no hard and fast rule around even role playing. The term role playing wasn't even invented. Like that came in the sort of the mid to late 70s after the books were released. What do we call this? And you had like your two broad, your war gamers sort of side, and then you had your sci-fi fans who kind of got brought in, and one were more role playing, and one were more, like your hardcore, this is a war game.
Well, it's really kind of
you
like
see it today.
but that's kind of, well, even with Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax, that I think
Yeah.
that epitomizes it right there.
Yeah, exactly. And Arneson was way more into the whole, politics and the backstabbing and the role playing, and
Yeah.
whereas I imagine Gygax is very, very sort of analytical and tactical, and so, but they were having those arguments even before it was really kind of a proper game, like before it became really Dungeons and Dragons as we know it, or anywhere close to it. And so, and I love that. Like, I love that Boston had their rules, LA had their rules. Like the 46 drop the 3 ability came out of LA, just at someone, people's tables, because that's how they played. Like, and to me, and then the Midwest had obviously they had their, because that was the birth of it. But all these different cities, satellite, people learned, and then they took it back to their cities, and it molded and evolved and changed, and exactly the same arguments as we're having now were had back then, about alignment, about, whether you could kill baby goblins if you're lawful, all those arguments were had back then, in the mid-70s. It's crazy. It's an eye-opening book. The Elusive Shift, I think it's called, but I highly recommend it. It's and to me, that's really that's the core of Dungeons and Dragons, and why I love it so much is because you can play it so many different ways, and you can play it your way, and your way is going to probably suck to someone else, but who cares?
Yeah, and I think it's also, what's interesting is, I think with a lot of the indies have designers have come to the OSR, and then they're taking in the school the system and stretching it and changing it in all sorts of different directions. Some making it more light, others more complex.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always a part of me that will go, oh, that's not right when I see something. But you got to resist that. Like, you've got to go. You can't go, you're wrong, even though you think they're wrong, because that's, you're wrong to them. You've got to rise above that instinct of, you're different, so therefore you're my enemy.
Yeah,
because
it's not, I'm not really Hegelian, but there's a sense of, Hegel is like there's thesis and there's antithesis, and then those come together and you form a synthesis of the two. I think that's just, it is like, it's different. It doesn't mean it's wrong, but it's like, but there may be something, you may not ever agree with it, but it may change your thinking on something.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, as much as there's so much about 5e I dislike from the rules up, but there are certain things in that I've taken away and I still use them, say, for my solo games. Like a lot of the tables in the DMSG I still use, because that the DMSG is for 5e is a great book. Forget the rules, just from a randomized table.
Yeah,
you can randomize a whole campaign.
Well,
and a dungeon.
I think the advantage and disadvantage rules are pretty impressive. I mean, it's very simple, and they may not have been the first ones to do it, but just a simple advantage and disadvantage. Let's just drop all this other pluses and minuses. It's like, that's a very
I did like that. And then the more I thought about it, and this is where I think 5e gets me, is the more I think about it, the more I dislike it. because I think while advantage and disadvantage seems like it's a very simple rule. I think it's a very blunt object. So to apply a +5 or -5 penalty on something is huge indeed. That's like a quarter of the D20 you roll,
Oh yeah, no.
So I think while it's easy and it's kind of, and a lot of the OSR games have kind of picked it up and run with it, for me, I don't think I'd ever use it. Because I like the granularity of like, is it +1, +2? And I feel like +5, like to get a +5 bonus, you must be doing something really, really, really good.
But think about it, like, let's say, for instance, you wanted to do random encounters. You can do advantage and disadvantage for that 1d6.
Yeah, true. Yeah. And I've used that mechanic in even in my zines in a couple of articles where I've taken, like, for example, I think one of the articles on, I'm just trying to remember which one it was, damage, I did advantage. Oh, that's right, it was for weapons versus armor. So I broke the armor down into leather mail plate, and then just did, you gain like piercing, slashing and bludgeoning. And for example, bludgeoning, I'm just trying to remember what it was, bludgeoning might get disadvantage against leather, for example, because it absorbs the blow or whatever. And so I've used, and that's on the damage dice. So I've used that mechanic, but I've used it, and that's why I said before, that's probably a really good example of what I said. Like I dislike 5e, but I've kind of pulled that mechanic and then used it in a different way.
See, what I like about it too, if you do reaction rolls, you can do that for the 2d6 table for OSE or BX. The problem is if you just use modifiers, you take out the opportunity for there to be either the hostile reaction or the friendly. But if you introduce a advantage or disadvantage, you still keep that possibility without removing it.
Yeah, true. Yeah. I mean, there's different ways to use it. I probably wouldn't use it as a to hit mechanic, but for that example and the damage example,
but the thing is, like, if you don't think about it just as everything, but let's just say, for instance, let's say you have a very strong poison or a very weak poison. You say, you know what, there's 2 poisons, regular, weak, and strong. Yeah. And it's going to be your disadvantage and disadvantage. You don't have to do damage class,
true,
or whatever, or plus or minus. You just say it's a strong poison. Disadvantage.
I guess it comes down to, and this is probably why 5e isn't the best for me, is because the way I sort of see their design, the way they designed the game, was they swung the pendulum too far to simplicity. And while a lot of the mechanics are very simple in that game, whereas I'm as much as I love like old school D&D, and a lot of the OSR stuff, which is very sort of leans towards the more simple, I'm a big fan of 3rd edition as well, which is crunch, So, and the character generation stuff in 3rd edition is amazing. Whereas 5e, they've kind of simplified it, but then everyone becomes kind of the same and it's kind of vanilla,
Oh,
and so
right. When you say simple,
so I kind of see, like I kind of see the advantage disadvantage like that as well, where they've made it simple, but what have they lost in that simplicity? What have they given up?
Yeah, I don't necessarily love the combat or things like that, but that concept, because I'm writing things, it's like making things easier or harder, and based on certain situations. It's a very simple, and it doesn't require math.
I agree. Like, I think it could be used in heaps of different ways.
But I think it's interesting you talk about, because I'm kind of like the opposite. I really do not like 3rd edition, but I'm just like lukewarm at best with 5th edition.
I wouldn't GM it anymore. I could probably play 2 or 3 campaigns now if I wanted to, and I just choose not to because I'm kind of GMing my own stuff, and that's using OSE, and I'm happy, like I don't, for me, it's about how many hours do I have in the day to play or to create stuff. And if I had all the time in the world, I would probably create or play 5e, but it's not high on the priority list. That's how I kind of look at it.
Well, I think for me, it does not emulate the genre I want to run.
Yeah, and that too. Like it's very high fantasy.
Yeah,
and it's like I kind of wished, like, for my wish list for D&D is that they create an edition that tells you how to play every genre you want to play. So if you want to play sword and sorcery,
yes.
this is and this will be in the
yes.
DMG. This is how you play sword and sorcery.
That was the promise of 5e. That was the promise.
Yeah, I know.
DMG.
And
they promised that.
And it kind of in the DMG it goes, okay, you can play sword and sorcery. No, you can't.
Well, what they don't provide is there's all sorts of levers you can pull, right? Whether it's the healing, the way like you're healing every short rest, every
like
long.
You can make it instead of a day.
You could take healing off the table through clerics. There's a lot of levers and switches and knobs and buttons you can push, but they never tell you what the effects of those are and what that means.
Yeah.
Like if you say, you know what, no healing by clerics, and it's going to take you're only getting 1 hit point back per week. What does that mean? What should you as a GM be doing differently?
Yeah. But then you come into the thing, like you go, okay, so healing, you do a week instead of a day. Okay, but what does that mean for, say, warlocks who get their spells back every hour?
Right.
Or, do they have to wait for that as well as the healing? Like, do they, and so it's kind of like this, like, it's not easy to change. It's not modular enough to change.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I guess that's probably what I'm after, a modular system. And I kind of figured by 5th edition, they could have had this stuff down. And I feel like they've just gone completely another way. And that's fine. That's the business model.
I don't think very many systems emulate multiple styles of play well. I don't know if there's really any.
Yeah, but if there was going to be one, D&D would be it. Like, you think about the how D&D started, and it was very sort of the sorcery and, very pulp fiction.
Yeah.
And so it can do it, but then it can do high adventure, and it can do mid-level fantasy, which was kind of what 3rd it was. I kind of see it that way. So it through the editions, it's kind of done all this stuff. Can we just kind of bring it together?
I think to me, it's like I can't remember if it was Devil's Wear Prada, or maybe it was Devil's Wear Prada. Maybe it was just what's her name, the gal who went to prison for for taxes, Martha Stewart.
Oh yeah.
But the idea is, I mean, it's Martha Stewart. I think she made a statement like she's the one that defines what is I don't say proper, what's the word I'm looking for, what is going to be trendy. She doesn't follow trends, she makes the trend. And I think that's where D&D is. They're not saying we're not following anybody, we are creating, and this is what everything else is going to define itself by.
I mean, look, it's super popular, and it's doing well. And who am I to say they're doing it wrong? I've got my dinky zine.
Yes. Well, to be honest, I think they're doing it right. And by saying right is they're wildly popular. They're raising the consciousness of people towards these games. Yeah. They're breaking barriers. They're bringing people into the hobby, and people from that will sprinkle out into other genres and other games.
And I think it will, because my highest visited blog post on my site is one that I wrote about how to transform 5e into OSR. So basically, I just list how I would go about transforming 5e if you want to play a more sort of OSR type, old school type D&D. And it's my most popular blog post by far. It's the whole 80-20, Pareto principle, it always ranks like number 1 or number 2 as far as people visiting the website. And they stay and they read it because I can see the time on page, And so there's a lot of people who are playing 5e who realize that, okay, maybe it's a bit over the top, that want to move it back and are interested in that. And that to me means that that there is people coming in from D&D, playing it for a while, going, you know, what's it? Oh, hang on, what's this other stuff over here? You know, like they might not be playing other role-playing games straight away, but I think they're interested in other editions. And I think that's why OSE is so popular. I mean, look at their Kickstarters. You know, they're raking in a lot of money through the Kickstarters.
They are. They are. And I think what's also interesting, going back to kind of the signal that they're doing with their artwork, they're kind of creating their own. They're kind of creating their own, I don't know how to describe it, but their own feel to the game. Maybe it's through the art, their art choices.
Yeah.
They're not really doing even though they do have Earl Otis doing, you know, the box, but they're not going like crazy quirky, but they're almost going, I don't know how to describe it.
I definitely get the sense of what you're talking about, because I don't buy their modules. But this is probably very superficial, but artwork means a lot to me. Like if the artwork isn't my style, I'm probably not going to look at it, right? And so and their artwork I don't particularly like the Errol Otis style, I guess if you want to call it that, to me doesn't appeal. That, like, he's a great artist, and I get what the appeal is.
Yeah, I'm like the opposite. If it's Earl Otis, I'd want every piece Earl Otis. If I could do that.
But for me, it's not. It's a bit too cartoony. Maybe, I don't know if that's the right word. It's
I
not
understand what you're
enough.
saying. It provides a certain feel. I think I think the art, does the art represent the kind of game you want to play, or what kind of games?
Yeah. And I'm much more
Elmore.
of a low to mid fantasy, kind of gritty, realistic. Like another blog post I've got is basically called Grounded Fantasy, and it lays out how I want my fantasy.
Yeah, because Earl Otis, I think, is a little bit of horror, surreal, deadly.
Surreal. I think that's the bit that rubs me wrong for D&D. Is the surreal bit. Yeah. I get why people like it, but again, for me, it's too surreal and not gritty enough.
To me, it almost has a Lovecraftian feel to it as well.
Yeah.
There's just a darkness to it that's just,
there's this kind of this, because he uses such bright colors, but underneath it, you kind of go, there's something else going on here. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I love the art, but it doesn't scream D&D to me. But as artwork, I'd happily hang one on my wall.
Right.
You know,
but it doesn't evoke play to you. It doesn't evoke what you're wanting out of the game.
Yeah. So it's so going back to the OSC, I think that they're using that to create the style, and that's, you know, and I think that would tap into a lot of the OSR and the old school players, which it obviously has. But for me, I love the rule set. I love the fact that it's, you know, it's BX, but it's, you know, it's laid out so well. I love it. For my head, looking at that book it's just beautiful, and it's funny because their zine is very close in formatting to my zine, and I think on that level it kind of resonates. And so I think for going back to the zine just for a minute, the way I look at it, there's 4 principles to creating the zine. There's 4 things you need, really. 1 is writing, 2 is the art, 3 is layout, and 4 is editing, proofreading, which kind of you can tie into probably writing as part of that process. So maybe 3. The writing I do myself. I've got that, right? The art, I get stock art, but the layout, and this is probably where I differ to a lot of the zines that are out there, especially for the old school stuff. I took that out of the equation. So I'm horrible at graphic design and layout and stuff. My brain just doesn't work like that, and I'm not artistic enough to do it. I probably could practice and spend a whole lot of time to learn it, but I don't have that time. Right. So what I did was, with the template that I had, and I still use it, I took it out of the equation. So I could either pay for it, take it out of the equation, or do it myself. And I decided to take that out of the equation. So and this is why I can pump it out every month, really, is that I don't worry about it. I get messages a lot from people who see my zine and go, hey, can I, chew your ear and get some, pointers, and can you have a look at my zine and stuff? And then a lot of them go, oh, I'm just spending so much time on layout. And I went, nah, I'll just do it in Google Docs, and all it is 2 columns. The image is just overlaid it over the top of it. And that's it for layout. But
so the other thing I'll tell you about Google Docs, which I didn't realize until I started digging, there is a tremendous amount of layout tweaks you can do that's not obvious. Like you can really do many, many more things than what's obvious to get even more, so it is a very robust, even though it's obscure where these tools are, and it's not as easy as other programs, but you can do it with Google Docs.
Yeah, and I've probably only touched the surface, really. There's a heap of stuff that I haven't even looked at. But again, it goes back to my time. Like, do I want to spend a day playing around with layout, which might not even turn out, or do I want to spend a day writing, and getting 2 or 3 more articles out, and I'd much prefer the latter. So I know, like when we discussed about me coming on here, one of the things you wanted to discuss was just about, the regularity of it. And I think that's my trick. I've just taken layout out. Like I've taken one of those 4 or 3 fundamentals out of the picture, and therefore I can focus, and then I just buy the art. And now I can just focus on content, editing, writing, that stuff. And so I only have to do one thing, like there's still layout as far as, like where does this picture go? But even that, I've put a formula.
Right.
Like in the back of my head, I've got like, you have to have a picture every 2 or 3 pages, because otherwise it's too much text. You just kind of break it up. I start with an image at the top of the most articles, just to set the scene. So there is some layout stuff there, the decisions there, but to actually lay out, like get into a program and lay it all out and get the artwork and, edit it, and before you even put it in the layout program and, all this sort of stuff, that would take me months, literally, so I've just ignored it, and I've done a template, and I use that template again and again. And even some of my other projects, I just use the same template. Like I'm just, it's almost being lazy, but I know that it's going to take me too long to do something.
Well, but I think the other thing too is, especially as you keep doing this, you're creating consistency, and I think people enjoy that consistency.
Yeah, I think people, I think human beings like consistency. I think they like my zine coming out every month. I think they like getting it in the mail every month, because it's a and I think people just like the feeling of like there's a certain level of comfort in that. You know what I mean? Like I think that's why subscriptions work. Like you pay out every month and you might get something, like you'll get a box of random toys or something, whatever you're doing. But there's a level of comfort in that. It's like, in a level of, like you get your endorphin hit every month or something, like I think it's built into the human nature for consistency to happen,
And they have expectations too. I mean, now after all these issues, they expect that consistency within your zine. So
yeah, I often think, like, if I went down the layout design route and I designed this kind of, really cool, I think I'd get blowback.
Yeah.
Like, I think I would be like, oh, I like your old stuff better. Like that, and I get that. Like for me, it's about the content. Like I said before, for me, it's all about the content. As long as it's aesthetically pleasing and I can read it, and I do I break paragraphs up pretty, I don't have walls of text and stuff.
Right.
As long as you meet those basic criteria, for me, it's just about reading stuff, and just to get ideas, and the articles are only 1,000 words, roughly, usually, maybe even less. Some I've just done 1 column, like if I'm just doing a couple of magic items or something like that. And for me, from a design point of view, it works too, because to work on a huge project, takes for me a lot of effort. But if I can just write, 5, 6, 7 different articles on different topics, I'm much happier. It's those short bites,
Right.
And even though people say that's how you create something big, you break it up. In my head, I have so mmany ideas. I'm like, I'd rather just do 7 articles in one zine than write a whole book on something, on one topic, because all these other ideas would be floating around still.
Well, I think there's definitely, our personalities come into play in the things that are rewarding to us and the things aren't. Some things that become work. Obviously there's some things that are work that we don't like to do, that we have to do, but we might as well make it fun because it's like,
yeah. But having said that, there are a few longer term projects that I'm working on, but they're kind of in the background and they kind of sit there. And I'm working on a series of monster manual type books, which I think you are too, aren't you? You're
yeah. So my plan is, I'll let that secret. So my plan is to take the OSE bestiary, but do write-ups for them, but in a way that actually gives GMs ideas on how to use them.
Yeah.
So if you come up with an acolyte, like what do you do with a roll up an acolyte?
Yeah.
You roll up a camel. What do you do with a camel?
So would it be like okay, so you roll an acolyte, you look up acolyte, you roll another d6, and this is the story, his story. Like number 3 is different to number 1, or is that how you're gonna
No, it's like, why?
Or?
What are these acolytes doing? Are they there to oppose you? Are they there to assist you? And then okay,
but is that like a random, like it'll be more random rolls, or will it sort of be like a set?
It just depends. They all vary. So like the acolytes, I kind of talk about what they could be doing and interact with the party. And then I would also put in, well, if they're chaotic or if they're opposing alignments, like, they could be helping you. What would be very interesting is if they're also an opposite alignment.
Yeah.
And then you come with these conundrums, or it could be even with let's say with a boar, I kind of looked at the mythology surrounding a boar and then look at ways you can put that mythology into a boar.
Yeah, that sounds cool. Yeah, I think mine's more centered on getting the monsters into the world. So I'm really big on world building, and I think throughout the editions there's a lot of bits and pieces around how to, like, where does a minotaur fit in your world? Like, where does a Medusa, like, how does the Medusa affect the surrounds? Like, where do you put centaurs? Where do you put Wemmicks? Where do you put where do these people live? Like, do they live on the open plains, or do they live in the mountains? So, and it's sort of probably a way to help create random encounter tables as well. So you could easily just look at the monster manual and go, like, so it's more less about the combat side of it, because I kind of think that's been done to death. And I like the way that you're kind of bringing encounters into it. Like it's like, doesn't have to be combat, like it can be something else. Whereas mine, I think it will focus on where to put them in your world. So not only and how they act. Like, so are they nocturnal? Are they
So we're really doing like an ecology.
Yeah, basically an ecology of monsters, but probably a few other things in there as well.
Yeah.
So
I think to me it demonstrates that you can look at the monster manuals. In fact, talking about 5e products, they would come out with these like Mordekainen's I forget. I got several of the books.
Time of Foes, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm like, get all excited, and I start reading through it, and it's like, it's still all these words, and it doesn't give me anything I can really use.
Yeah, and it's even worse now, because the latest one, I believe they ripped out all the lore. So you just basically have this neutral stat block with powers, and there's no guidance on how to use them or what their history is, or
right. What would be nice is if they said, we don't think these things should always be evil. Okay, give me 3 options. Give me the
Yeah,
lore. Okay. If you want orcs in your world to be one way, it's this. If you want to be another, it's this. And others,
yeah,
it's like, okay, that'd be fun. You know,
yeah,
it's like
yeah. But
it's
instead, they kind of went the other way. They like I don't know what their end game is with that. Like whether it's they wanted them neutral so they could just put them into any universe they create from now on.
yes, I think so.
Yeah, but then
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 that's
they're
where the
going to
lore
have to
would
write the
be.
lore for that universe. Maybe I don't know.
But
Like
they never really have come up with a setting book, though, have they?
no, not an original.
And what?
I think they brought out one which was like the sigil equivalent, like the
Yeah.
plane. So basically, I think they're going to use that as a hub, and then they're going to create these different worlds that lead off from that hub. Maybe I don't know.
Well, I think it
Like why not just use sigil?
Yeah, I think, and they have put out, I think, a little bit of stuff from the Magic the Gathering settings,
Yeah,
but there's not
which
really
is
been but nothing that's really been deep, I don't think.
no. And then they did this whole Strixhaven thing, and that was a bit of a bomb. Like I don't like. I'd like us to see a really healthy world. Like back in the second edition, they used to, they had Dark Sun, they had Planescape, they had they still had Greyhawk going, they had Forgotten Realms. Like these were chunky worlds that are still beloved now, and I just don't see that in 5e. Maybe
No.
like maybe with what's his name, Matt Mercer, he's had a couple of campaign books, maybe that is scratching that itch. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely nothing, yeah, like it used to be, even with what I'm assuming, even though I haven't looked at his stuff, I assume it's
Yeah.
more high level. But yeah, it's just it just doesn't seem like, there's a lot of stuff out there, at least as far as in D&D land. But I guess the old stuff's still there. So
Yeah, and that's what's great about it. I love the fact that you can still download or buy secondhand the old stuff, and I've sort of kept my collection sort of slowly growing from eBay and Facebook, just trying to get some of that old stuff that I really liked that I kind of lost over the years. But then like other stuff I'll just buy on PDF. The fact that you can just download $20 and you can download a whole setting or something,
yeah.
from drive through, it's great. Yeah, I love the fact that the old stuff, like if the old stuff wasn't there and we just had 5e, I would go nuts. But the fact that it's there and it's a vibrant community, like, I mean, the fact that I can produce the zine and have 50 odd people on Patreon pay me money every month, just for producing something that I wanted to produce anyway,
So
just floors me.
you probably don't know the demographics as far as systems that the people use for your
My
the
zines
patrons.
for.
No, the patrons.
Yeah, I mean, I played around. It's weird. My demographics kind of a bit all over the shop. So if you look at my email subscriber list, it's 35 and above, most of them. But if you look at my patrons, which I can kind of figure out, I think that skews younger. With some older people as well. So maybe 50-50, maybe older, younger. And whereas my website visits are just all over the place. Like location wise, it's all mostly state based. Although I'm breaking into Europe now. I've got I've got at least one Patreon follower from Sweden.
So, wow.
Yeah, so it's all over the place, and a few from Australia and stuff. But yeah, so my demographic stuff, depending on which platform, and the email thing doesn't surprise me a lot, because emails, like, I don't think a lot of young people subscribe to newsletters as much as older people do. So that doesn't surprise me, because a lot of younger people probably get their news and stuff from social media and stuff. So I would say it's probably generally would be a split. But as far as edition usage, I'd say it would skew towards the OSR sort of old school stuff. I don't know whether I'd have a lot of Patreons or patrons who are 5e diehards, because I don't think the aesthetic is the same. Like I think the feel and the aesthetic for my zine, other than maybe the occasional front cover, it doesn't, I don't think it would appeal, you know. So whereas I think it's a shame in a way, because some of the articles they could use, and maybe they do, you know, I don't know. You know, I mean, the zine gets downloaded, you know, hundreds of times. You know, I sort of keep tally about, and you know, it's a rolling thing. So, you know, like it'll obviously get a spike the month it releases, and then over time, like if I have like issue 1 and 2 has been downloaded way more than any other edition, because it's just the length of time it's been up there. So people will go there, discover it, download a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, or I think even if people start later, it's like with a podcast. It's kind of changed more lately, but I think people would tend to hear the podcast and then they may go to the first couple episodes.
Yeah,
they won't necessarily go back to all of them, but they will grab, at least go back to the beginning.
Yeah, well, with your podcast, I obviously came in and listened to the latest ones at the time, and then now I've been going backwards, because I'm just sort of going back in reverse order. So there's a lot of, it's kind of annoying, because I know you have a lot of people on who have Kickstarters at the time. Yes. I go, man, that sounds really cool. Oh, that was like 6 months ago. Damn it, I missed it. So, but other than that, it's great. Yeah. I've followed a lot of people on Twitter thanks to your podcast. I think like Levi.
Yeah.
He was one I think I started following just because I listened to him on your podcast. There's a couple others, I can't remember their names off the top of my head, but yeah.
I will say, yeah, there's definitely a large. I'm not saying there aren't any bad actors out there, but in general, as far as the creators go, I've just seen nothing but really just good, positive people all the way around.
Yeah, I found that like a lot of people bag Twitter, and I must admit I've heavily curated Twitter.
You have to.
Yeah, you have to. But the tools are there to do it. Like that's why I love the platform. Like Facebook is just a mess. Whereas at least with, you know, except for the groups, some of the groups are okay. But at least with Twitter, it gives you the tools that you can go, okay, I want to, like I've blocked 5e like as a term. So I don't even see 5e stuff anymore. One, I'm not that interested. And two, it's just fighting. Like that's the only thing that I used to see. And as soon as I blocked it, I went, man, my life is better. You know?
Yeah.
Like, so, and I'm sure that there's a lot of 5e people out there who block OSR, you know, like because they just get into fights because of that, you know, like, so, but I've blocked people, I've muted people, I've muted conversations, you know, but I've got it to the point now where I go on there and I'm like, actually, this is pretty good. I want to hear from most of these people, you know, like.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, it's taken me a bit, but no, it's definitely a very positive thing. I can pretty much go there at any time and see quite a bit of posts, you know. And I think the other thing is, you know, I got to be careful too. Sometimes it's like, you know, you may like a person, but then you see the likes that this person does can start filling your feed, and you be like, I like you, I don't like what you like, because I don't want to see this. Like, yeah, I gotta
I'm very much a I won't like someone just because they liked me. I'm very fussy. So if you're on my friends list, like my people I follow on there, you've earned it, you know. And because I Twitter is such a I only use it for role-playing stuff. That's it. I don't talk about politics. I don't talk about my VHS collection. I don't talk about books, you know, other books, just D&D. So even if you're really good and you've got an amazing zine, if you talk about politics all day on your Twitter, I'm not following you.
I'm pretty much the same. I look at, what I'll do is I'll look and see what people post. So somebody follows me, but maybe they don't post very often, I'll follow them back, because I figure they're not going to pollute it too much.
Yeah.
But then there's but the other thing is I do look at the stuff they do, and is it positive stuff, or is it just a bunch of negative?
Yeah.
And I don't mind a little bit of politics. I just don't want it all the time.
Yeah. for me, it's each platform has its own use. Like I follow politics on other platforms, like I get my news from other platforms. I don't need to see it on I've even done stupid things, like I leave the messenger bar up, so it covers up the trending stuff on Twitter. I used to have a Google plugin thing on the browser on Chrome that used to get rid of the trending.
Yeah.
But it stopped working all of a sudden. So I ended up just putting the message bar up, and that covers it up, so I don't see it. So I don't get distracted. Like all I see is just that,
Right.
So just things like that. Like it just makes, and on mobile you don't see it anyway. So, so it just makes life a lot easier on that platform because it is full of crazy stuff.
Yeah. But
it's my platform for D&D and role playing in general.
Well,
and
I think
like
too is like I've also started, following artists too. It's like, well, I sure like to hire this person one day.
Yeah. Same. I use Instagram a lot for that. So because Instagram obviously is very much more of a visual medium, and you don't get a lot of the discussions you get on Twitter. Because that's what I love about Twitter is the discussions that are had. Until they turn into just bickering. But anyway, but on Instagram, I'm much more into the following the artists, because obviously it's, you can see their work and you can see the quality of it, and you go, okay, I'm going to bookmark these people like these people because I want to use them one day in my zine. Like that. That's kind of how I use that platform.
Yeah, I tried Instagram a long time ago, back my photography days, and it was just too much work because they wouldn't allow you couldn't post from your
computer. You can now.
Yeah.
But it's only been fairly recently. Yeah.
But I don't know. We got, you and I, we all have limited amount of time, and it's like, what should I be? What's the most bang for my buck?
And because I've started thinking of the zine as a kind of like a side business, maybe. It's kind of like I have to start thinking about, okay, where's the best use of my time? Like Twitter's really good for me, but then maybe Reddit could be useful, but then I haven't really used Reddit that much. So then there's a whole learning curve there, so it just comes down to what you like and what time you have to use it, because there's no point going on a platform and just half-assing it. You kind of have to go in with a plan.
No, not me. I have asshole.
Then I try marketing brain.
Then I try and get the other cheek on. Once I get the first one on, I full asset. But no, I just jump in. I have no clue. I just like, it's going to happen. We'll see what happens, and I'll just deal with the fallout and regroup.
Yeah.
But because I was thinking about doing short videos and maybe doing like TikTok or something like that, and do.
That's a whole nother beast.
Yeah, but I'm thinking about, like, one of the things I'm thinking about just doing just small fun stuff, like going through the traveler book. And I thought, well, if you just do it in like, 2-minute videos, that might be kind of fun.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's plenty of ways you can use each platform. You just have to get creative with it. But yeah, TikTok is just a whole. I think I'm too old.
Well,
I look at the stuff that's on there and I'm like, really? What is going on?
My kids wanted me to post, because when I went to Northern Ireland, had some plans for certain kinds of food, and they were like, oh, you need to post this on TikTok and do this.
Yeah.
And when I looked at TikTok, I'm like, I'm opening this up and I'm seeing things that I really shouldn't be seeing. Like, I don't need to see teenage women doing these things. And you're like, well, you gotta start searching and it'll filter the stuff out. You just gotta learn. But I'm like, why is this the first thing I'm seeing?
Yeah because of you. Probably because of your demographic.
I don't know. It's like, this is like, but anyway, but then also like Facebook, you can do videos too. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, YouTube has the short video now too. I watch a few of those. There's a guy, a lawyer, who does videos, and he does quite a few short ones, and I watch his. It's just like topical stuff. Like I don't know how long they last, maybe 30 seconds or something. So that might be a way to go too.
There you go. No, yeah, I don't, and I guess I gotta think really what I'm wanting out of this too. It's just like, but I think the thing is, it's maybe I just don't know, and that's where I kind of the not planning. It's like, well, we'll just see. Maybe I like it, maybe I won't.
I think for me anyway, the bottom line is, am I going to enjoy it? So I enjoy being on Twitter. I enjoy doing the zine. I couldn't do it if I didn't enjoy it, and that's why I don't write for 5e. Like I could make 10 times the amount of money that I'm making now if I wrote for 5e, because just purely because of the audience. But I don't want it because that would be a job.
So why couldn't you? This is because I was thinking, and in a lot of ways, I wonder if you brand your because you don't brand it as old school essentials, right?
No.
But I'm wondering if you do better if you did brand it as old school essentials.
Yeah, and I thought of that because I did an OSE special issue, so it was just all OSE stuff.
Yeah.
So I did some classes, I did monsters, I did spells. It was all for OSE. The way I started it was that I had in mind that it was always going to be an open book. No matter what edition you could read it, you get ideas, it didn't matter. And I could have gone, and I still could go down the OSE route and just have a lot more monsters in there and just have them OSE and a lot more spells and all that sort of stuff.
Well, I don't know that you have to, because the way I'm going to approach this, especially for the zine, even though the is just the articles are articles. Who cares? Because it's all, if it's just general stuff, it's just general stuff.
Well, I have a mixture. Like there's some mechanic stuff in there. But I think D&D is still it still all works on the basic platform. Like it all still works on a D20.
Yes.
It's just the modifiers that have changed. Like with OSE, the modifiers are fairly low. The damage is fairly low. And I guess when I do stuff
and
like
the hit
that,
points are fairly low too.
Yeah, but the equivalent of.
Oh,
yeah,
right.
So,
right.
Yeah, so the damage is all low, but then the hit points are low. So it all evens out. And that's what I'm saying. Like across the board, it pretty much works the same way. Like it's just the numbers involved. So, and the mechanics still work the same way. So it's still a D20 roll. It's still, you're rolling a D4, a D6, or a D8 or D10 for damage. It's all still, so anything that you do within that scope still works on most systems.
Right.
Like you probably just need to tweak it a little bit. And this is where I sort of said before, like, I don't care, like, go ahead and tweak my stuff. Don't take it as gospel. I don't want you to do that. I want you to get the idea and tweak it as much as you can and as much as you want to. And the fact that I think, like, I kind of like it the way that I've done it, because it is agnostic. It is free of one particular system, because I think if I did an OSE zine, it would be competing with the official OSE zine, which is a whole nother story. But also, I think it would cut out a lot of people from reading it, because they go, "Oh, I don't play OSE," And so I don't want that. I want everyone to read it.
Right.
I want as many people as, and get inspired. Like if someone who plays 5e picks it up and goes, "Wow, I love this aesthetic. I love, this is kind of cool," and that gets them into OSE or gets them into old school or gets them into another game or something, I'm happy with that.
That's where we need to peer into all the possibilities and all the universes and understand.
Yeah, and there's enough material. Like I could go another 20 years with this and not run into the issue where I have to pick a particular system. There's so much out there. Like there's so much you could talk about.
I just wonder, this is why I don't know. I mean, I wonder is if you label it for a system, you're definitely going to get the diehards for that system. But I wonder if also people outside OSE would see the OSE label as being a universal thing. So like Swords and Wizardry would pick it up.
I see a lot of people co-branding. Like there's a lot of people who release stuff on Kickstarter or whatever, and they say, OSR and 5e compatible. So I could probably slap that on there.
Yeah, that to me, what's that different? If it was like Swords and Wizardry and old school, but that just seems like that's at that point when you're saying, yeah, it's both 5e and I start to be like,
yeah. And to be honest, I see that and kind of get a bit turned off myself.
yes.
Like I'm like, yeah, okay. But I guess what they're saying is the stats are there for both.
They are.
You know, like, so you've got the stat block for 5e, you got the stat block for, you know, that's how I, especially like an adventure or something,
Yes.
or like a, you know, like, I think that's what they're saying. But having said that, there are
it still turns me off, and I don't know why. It's not that I'm repugnant to the 5e. I think it, to me, it kind of creates a, I think it, to me, is two things. I think you can change around the monsters, but it having them both just seems awkward. It just seems very awkward. And also, I don't know that, to me, it's like it would be a different feel. I don't know if you can just change out a few monsters and it's all the same.
Yeah, and that's what I was about to say. I think there's a fundamental feel that would change. I think some adventures would lend itself, like if it was just a straight dungeon crawl, maybe. But if it was like a kind of a, you know, I don't know, like a goofball adventure, it might not fit in 5e. You know, or if it's a really dark and gloomy sort of, it wouldn't fit 5e. Whereas on the other hand, if it was like a super, you know, save the world quest, it might not fit OSR. You know, like the feel of it, like the, you know, like
you're right. Like you're just trying to make it through without getting stabbed so you don't die.
And yeah, exactly. Like, I run a West Marches campaign, and the players pretty much has like, if I survive, I've won.
Yeah.
Like if I make it back to the town without a debilitating injury, or I don't make it back, then I've won. You know, like stuff the treasure. I made it back.
Yeah, I was just it's like, you know, there's a very real possibility a person can walk around with one hit point, and it depends how you do hit points with OSC, whether you go hardcore or you just roll the die.
Oh well, I go hardcore. I've got an illusionist, I think he is, with one hit point in the party. he hasn't died yet.
No, that's why, because he only has one hit point.
Like, he doesn't go anywhere near anything.
Yeah.
I think he was knocked out once, because I've got a rule where if they reach 0, you can make a death saving throw, and if you make it, you get like a debilitating injury instead. So you're still alive, but you suffer a permanent injury. So it could be like, you know, -5 to charisma, or it could be you know, your right arm's gone, you know, or something like that. Like I had a barbarian who smacked in the leg, and he half movement rate, you know. So I've got stuff like that built in where, and I like that because it's kind of like this town's going to fill up with all these like amputees and and these ex-adventurers that have just seen too much and been through too much, and they just can't adventure anymore, you know. Like I kind of like that aesthetic. I like that, you know, you walk into a tavern and you see like the guy missing a leg, and he's got one arm, another one with an eye missing, another one who's slightly deaf, you know.
One thing I thought was for a goblin character would be, or class would be, you know, anytime they would take a killing blow, that you'd roll a d6, and that's what gets lobbed off.
Yeah.
But story wise, they could always then get something mechanical.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like I think the barbarian, I think the player retired their character, but one of the other players said, oh, he was a blacksmith, and he said, I'll make you an iron leg.
Yeah.
You know, so I said, oh, okay, if you do that, you can be 3/4 movement, you know, right, and have a cool leg.
But I thought too, if you do the same with the goblin, it's like the ones that get the reverence are the ones that are missing all their arms and legs.
Yeah. So, but you know, it's like the Star Wars. I know the old D6 WEG Star Wars game had a rule in it where if you got killed by a lightsaber, you could lose a limb instead, because, you know, the old hand being chopped off. You know, like I kind of like that. Like I kind of like the fact that, you know, you've got a chance not to die, but just to, you know, or maybe walk away from, you know, with a debilitating injury.
Well, and I think
that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think just instant death states is not great. One thing I also was thinking about poison rules. I thought, like, because poison I think is very boring. You roll a save or you die. But what if you roll and if you fail, you're still going to die, but you're not going to die till that night session's over.
Yeah. Well, actually, third edition had a system like that built into Poison, and you saved immediately, and then you saved an hour later. So you could potentially take two lots of damage, but it also meant that it kind of, I guess, instituted the poison's going through your system.
Yeah.
And so you could die an hour later.
Well, so I thought about that. But I thought the problem is that creates more complication. What if it's just simply your character's dead?
Yeah.
And then then the people.
But I like that. Like, I like the fact that you're going to die.
But that's just it. That's the meta.
Yeah.
And then the players will play their characters knowing it by the end of the evening they're dead.
Yeah.
So they're going to say, you know what, I am going to go out in a spectacular
with a blaze of glory.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm poisoned.
No, I like that.
I feel a course through my body. And I thought there's probably a lot of other things like that we treat where it's just instant death, where I think, dying is not always interesting, but I think also removing death is also makes things uninteresting. So it's kind of like where those things.
Yeah, I don't like. I think the second issue of issue 2 of my zine was, the topic was death, because each issue usually has a different theme, and I wanted to cover it pretty quickly because it's such a us versus them debate, isn't it? Around, like, the modern players don't like the idea of the characters dying, whereas the sort of old school is like, it's just part of the game. Like, if you what's the danger if you take that out?
I think I think that the problem is they deride the people who don't necessarily want death to be ever present.
Yeah. And it goes back to the larger argument around story versus I want to be part of an epic story versus I'm just going on this adventure and I might not come back. It's the style of play that really drives that argument, I think.
Well, to me, and I'm more of the camp who I do like things being more deadly and people being more cautious. But on the other hand, it's like these people who complain about people who don't want the characters to die, or maybe it's much harder to die. It's like, well, if you read Conan, you start with book 1, he's going to be lasting for another 8 books. He's not going to die.
Yeah.
But
but then you could make the argument, that's a story.
Right, but I mean,
it's a book. If you want to write a book, go and write a book. But you're here to play D&D.
But I'm just saying
that's the argument.
But fiction, it is already there. It's already a part of the genre.
Yeah, I think I sit in the camp where I want the story to evolve from the dice rolls, from the play itself. I don't want a set story, and this is why I don't run adventures. I don't run pre-written adventures at all, ever. I never really have liked them, and even as a player, I play in them and I go, oh man, they're so linear. Like, they're just, can I do this? Yes. No, it's not in the scope.
Well, they have to be.
And I don't like that. That's why I always GM now open sandbox, open world. You can do whatever you want, go wherever you want, whatever. I don't care. I'll just make it up as I go, or there's ways you can do it. And I think for me, the stories that evolve out of that play are way cooler than anything that is pre-written or predestined or preordained. Right, even if a character dies, as a group, the stories that you can tell after that, like, even I'm just thinking the last session, like, it was, it was just really cool. Like, there was just a stupid moment where I think the priest was getting attacked by sturges, and had one in his neck, and he couldn't hit it with a mace because it was too big. So someone threw him a dagger, and even though he was getting the blood sucked out of him, the dagger hit his chest and fell to the ground. He said, I can't use it. I can't use sharp weapons. Like that, the comedy of that, like, and that's like just a simple example. Like, he would rather have died than use the dagger to stab because it was against his religion. But those moments, like, they're the story that evolves around just playing the game.
Oh, right. I agree. I'm just saying is that some people who are upset that it's harder to kill a character in 5e is bad. Well, it's like it's just different, it's
Yeah, like I still think it comes back to that, like, what do you want from the game? Do you want to be part of this epic storyline where you go from zero to hero or whatever, and it's this epic campaign and no one dies because that's you're pivotal to the storyline? Or do you want death lurks at every, like, they're probably the two extremes. There's probably a happy medium in there somewhere, but do you want the death is imminent,
right.
and it lurks around every corner? And to me, I'm way on that ladder
So for me, it
side.
varies, but I'm not necessarily always big at playing fantasy, but I like playing different game systems that
Yeah.
vary. Like I enjoy, or even running Star Wars where it's one
Yeah.
way versus Call of Cthulhu is another way.
Oh, yeah, totally. Like I'm just talking D&D here. Like,
Yeah.
WEG Star Wars, no one dies. Like,
Yeah.
the hero, you don't kill off Han Solo,
Right. But we've all kind of agreed this is the genre.
You
this is
hear that, Disney? You don't kill off Han Solo.
I've whatever they do is okay, because it's just
that's a whole other show.
okay.
But and if I'm playing Cthulhu, like, you're going to go insane or die. Like, they're the only two
you're
options.
disappointed if you don't. And I've had very successful situations where I'm like, I wish something would have happened to me. I played it.
Yeah, I played so many games of Cthulhu in different genres, like the Feng, and like every time if I die and I remain human, I think I've won.
Yeah, exactly. You have different levels.
Like, I've gone, like, I died human, nothing happened to me. I didn't turn into the Thing. I wasn't an alligator creature. I wasn't, I wasn't experimented on.
Yeah.
I wasn't sacrificed. I was just died. So I didn't go insane.
Yeah, the GM, there's just one GM one guy who runs the Call of Cthulhu, and he's been very disappointed. For whatever reason, we tend to be very lucky. Like, you pick the one room, everything else you would have. It's like, or we do the one thing that seemed out of place that we did that, like, kept us from all whatever happening. It's just been, but then I go afterwards. I kind of like, wow, that was, it just kind of. But yeah, for me, the D&D. I mean, I think it's. I don't know. I don't play a lot of D&D, but I think I prefer probably more like you, a little more deadly. But I just don't deride people who want.
No. Look,
but some people just lose their mind over this whole thing. Just like,
I know. And to be honest, I have to admit, I've probably gotten into debates around stuff around touching on this topic, and then you've just got to pull back and go, you know what? I think we're just on a different wavelength. Like, we're on a different page. We're playing a different game, and that's okay. And so now when it gets to the point, I'm either just mute the conversation, or I just say, I just think we're playing a different game. That's
so.
cool.
Let's go back to different games. So you like 3 or 3.5?
Yeah, I'm probably 3. Like
3.
3.5. There is a subtle difference, but it's an important difference between the two.
So what is it?
There's probably a couple of things. So I actually look at the 3rd edition rules as the ones that Monty Cook and I think Richard Baker and put together, and they're poetry. Like, they all flow, they all fit well together. And I know a lot of people go, "Oh, I don't like the universal mechanic and all that," but it just flows. It's a beautiful system. 3.5 brought in these changes that weren't necessary, and they did it, and they redid the books, and they sort of tore out all the cool stuff that was in the 3rd edition and replaced it with miniature stuff. Like, basically, they wanted to sell a line of miniatures, and so they went, instead of distances, they all went squares. Everything was square based, so you don't move 30 feet around, you move 6 squares. Because they were talking about minis. They wanted to sell the mini line. They made a whole lot of rules changes around the spells. So one of the reasons I love 3rd, and I won't go on too much, but one of the reasons I love 3rd is because it actually bridges old school and new school really well. It's kind of the fence sitter, because if you look at the spells, the spell descriptions, this is a prime example. They basically cut and paste from 2nd edition But they've just changed some of the rules, obviously, to fit the third E mechanic, which isn't that different really. So a lot of the spells are still, and second edition spells were still pretty deadly. Like they were, they probably weren't as deadly as first because they maybe tweaked them, but so there's a lot of stuff in third edition that's actually still quite deadly. And even though they brought in cantrips, you only got a limited number. It's not like 5e where you just unlimited in number. And the cantrips were very utility based. So what they did was they knew that, for example, light is a 0 level spell or a cantrip instead of a first level spell, because they knew that people would need that. But then they still, it's still part of the economy of D&D. So you don't get unlimited light spells, but that was another option, okay, instead of a torch. So and damage spells for 0 level, the most you could ever do with a damage spell was D3. It was like an ice,
right?
Or I think D6, but it was only against undead, for example. So it was very specific, right? So they were very much built around the utility spells, and so everything was kind of maintained from that second edition, but they kind of just got rid of all the little games like the D6 for morale and the reaction roll and all, and they just made it all into a D20 mechanic, which I get why people didn't like it, because I kind of like those old little mini games with the second edition, so I'm sort of leaning both ways. But at the same time, you can kind of see where they use that as a platform for some of the newer editions, because by the time 3.5 ended, you could see how it transformed into fourth. Because the mistake that Wizards made, and I think they're making this again with 5e, is they're listening to a vocal minority online. And what they did back in the day was it was all forum based. And so all the forums were full of arguments about combat. And so Wizards looked at that and went, oh, well, they just want combat. And what did we get? 4th edition, which was all about combat.
Right.
There was no role playing in it. And it failed because they failed to realize that people love combat, but they also love the other pillars as well.
So I've never played 4th edition, but I did buy a 4th edition module looked through it because it was like reasonably priced. And as I flipped through it, I realized it was just what you said.
It's all about the combat. Like, even like you think like the healing rules in 5e are bad. Like they're atrocious in 4e. Like I think at the end of the combat round, you all get boosted hit points just from the adrenaline of winning the combat or something. I don't know. Like I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's like it's really hard to die. Really hard. Like you'd have to be a complete idiot to die in that version of the game. And you get healing surges. It's all like, computer games, and, that's when they started bringing all that in. And I think they're kind of making the same mistake as they're heading. 5e was a nice at the beginning, but again, they're kind of going off in this direction that kind of lends itself to more that sort of superhero anime, superpower sort of stuff. And that's cool, whatever. But yeah, to answer your question.
Oh, go ahead.
I love a 3rd edition came out of the fact that it kind of, it power wise, it's kind of that mid-level fantasy, which is kind of my sweet spot. So it's more powerful than first or, OD&D, but it's still within the realms of, you could play like a low fantasy game with it, but yeah, 3.5 kind of started going down the road of like combat focused, mini focused, all that stuff. But if you look at just the 3rd edition stuff, it's some really good stuff in there. Monty Cook, Richard Baker, I'm just trying to think of some of the other guys. I feel bad for not remembering their names. They all did a fantastic job.
Was Bruce Cordell part of it?
Yeah, Bruce Cordell. A lot of them are on Twitter now doing their own thing. So
like Rich Baker or somebody. No, Rich Baker,
yeah.
But, it wasn't Luke Crane. It was some indie guys.
Flip through the book. Jonathan Tweet. That was
Jonathan Tweet. Yes.
Yeah. Skip Williams. Yeah. So they just did a fantastic job on creating, like, and I'm a big advocate for third, but it is, there's a lot more crunch to it, especially in the 3.5 era, because if you read, like, for example, prestige classes, like everyone bemoans prestige classes because every book had like a whole list of prestige classes that no one probably used, and they were overpowered and not tested. But if you look at Monty's write-up about prestige classes in the original 3.0 DMSG, they were meant for a specific purpose, and that kind of got blown out of the water. They were meant for a world building tool for the GM to create these kind of prestige classes, as the name suggests, that players could earn the right to get into, because they had all these sort of prerequisites, not just stat based, but role playing based. You had to, like, if you wanted to be like the Crown's assassin, you had to actually have assassinated someone 3 levels above yours, or you had to, just as a silly example, or if you wanted to be an explorer for the church, you had to, not only do you have to be religious and believe in it, you have to have gone off and done, proved that you could do this stuff, so there was some really cool mix of mechanics and lore, and that's what I love with role-playing games. If those two mesh, it's a perfect system. If those two mesh well for any role-playing game, and that's why I tend not to like generic rule sets, like Savage Worlds, for example. Like, I'm sure it's good, but it's too generic. It's like you need to have that world lore mesh with the rules. There's a game called Feng Shui role-playing.
Yeah.
It came out in the 90s. That's brilliant. The system is like a yin and yang, like it's based on Hong Kong action movies and stuff. And the system is just 2d6 yin and yang. Like, it just fits perfectly. Like, it's got the whole, vibe to it, and the lore fits the mechanics. And, so that stuff is really cool. And that's the stuff that I'm really interested in. When I look for a role-playing game.
I may have to give 3.0 a look. I don't think I'd ever run it, but I think I might be probably a lot of problems I had with 3.5 that won't be there for that.
Yeah, and I think, look, it's not everyone's cup of tea, and I get why a lot of the old schoolers don't consider it old school, even though it's like 25 years old at this point or something. It came out in 2000, so it was 22 years old. And I get it was a definite change and move away, because obviously Wizards wanted a new system that was kind of different to TSR. Having said that, though, they used a lot of second edition stuff. And if you look at the second edition, those players' guides that came out late in second edition, like Combat and Tactics and the players' options, they took a lot of that stuff and put it into third.
Yeah, I completely skipped second edition. I went from basically advanced D&D to years later to 5th edition.
Yeah. I think what killed third was the bloat. And that happens with every edition.
Well, I think and people, right. The thing is, what I was understanding is the guy that who owned Wizards of the Coast, did Magic the Gathering. He basically took D&D, made Magic the Gathering, that logic to it, where you could get mastery through knowledge. And so a lot of the fun was people trying to mastering their decks is like figuring out the builds.
Yeah, you could do that, but you can do that with any of it. Like any game you can do that with. And to be honest, I played third edition for years. I think it comes down to the group you play with.
Well, what I'm saying is, I think the idea is the way the mechanics were set up, it rewarded people who liked reading into details. And
I get that, but again, like I DM'd for years and years third edition, and I never had a player who I had one player who kind of liked to optimize characters and stuff and builds, but everyone else was like flawed and just focused on the role playing. I think it just comes down to the players and the groups. Like I get that, I kind of get that, and I can see that, but I never experienced that.
Right. But I think it does. The complexity just does
Oh,
scratch an itch for
it's
some people.
complex and it's crunchy.
Yeah.
But again, with any edition, if you just use the basic 3 core books, you're good.
Right.
It's just the bloat that killed it. And I can kind of see the same thing happening with 5. Like the bloat's going to kill it.
Yeah, and they're going to come with a new edition. I think they've already mentioned that.
So, but again, at the same time, I love the simplicity of OSE and old school stuff as well. And I like the mini games. I like the use of D6. I love D6 is like my favorite dice ever. Anytime you can roll reaction roll or, morale or whatever with a D6 or initiative with a D6, I'm there, So I'm sort of straddling between that old school and the third. So if I ever make a role-playing game, it'll probably be a mashup between those two. God help me.
Well, I think we're about hitting the time-space continuum, Russ.
Yes, it's been a delight.
Oh, likewise.
Yeah, I could talk all day, but I'll let you go.
It's getting evening here. It's getting dark.
We have lives.
Yeah, we do. So anyway, thanks again for joining me, and I'll have to have you on again sometime.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks so much for having me, Jeff.